afternoon, everyone. My name is Kieran. I'm case facilitator this afternoon. Before we get started, I just have a few announcements to go over. First and foremost, welcome to JDC West 2015 tax case presentation. Thank you to our judges for being here today. We have Amanda Gallivan from KPMG, Donna Dangerfield, KPMG, Jonathan Helm, Franklin Templeton Investments, Whitey Mitchell, Sterling Financial Accounting, Phil Hansick from Ministry of Advanced Education, and Jennifer Figner from BCIT. You competitors have 20 minutes to present. Immediately following your presentation, judges have 5 minutes of questions. We have our timekeeper right there letting you know where you are in your presentation. No questions, comments, cell phones, or picture taking from the audience. We ask that you hold your applause until after the question period, and we ask that the audience leave the room immediately following the question period. Competitors, you may begin when you're ready.
Nice to see you again. Nice to see you. Nice to see you. Hi, Susan. Nice to see you.
Nice to see you.
Good to see you. Good to see you.
Nice to see you again.
Good to see you.
Nice to see you. Hi, Susan. Good to see you.
Good afternoon, Susan. Thank you for having us here today. My name is Marielle, and these are my colleagues, Troy and Scott, and we are very excited to talk to you about and to take advantage of the different world of opportunities to you and to your family, the different alternatives on how you can go about it and its tax consequences. So first, let's take a quick look at the agenda for today. At any moment in the presentation, if you want to refer back to it, it's going to be on the first page of the handout that we provided. Here are some of the facts that we think are important in your current situation. As you mentioned, Susan, you and Richard are ready to retire at any moment now. And considering your current health situation, we want to make sure that there are no tax risks that will be in the future. So we want to mitigate that risk right away. Another thing that you mentioned is that your son, Henry, is also a prominent lawyer, and there is a possibility that you can include him in your law firm, and we want to consider that as we go through the different alternatives. However, we also want to point out that you mentioned that there are some third party who was also interested to purchase your law firm, so that's something that we're going to look at as well. As we go through it, we mentioned that we saw that there is also tax legislation that prohibits the issuance of dividends by the use of the family trust if the beneficiary is not a lawyer themselves. So that's something that we're going to talk about in the next few minutes as well. The primary issue that we're going to talk about today is the transfer of ownership of Meal Inc. Then we're going to move on to the secondary issues that you've raised. First, we're going to talk about your retirement income in the future. We want to make sure that you're going to be very comfortable as you go through retirement, having at least $100,000 to $125,000 of income per year. Now we're going to talk about the insurance policies that you have and some concerns that you have with them. Next one is we're going to talk about your mortgage. As you mentioned, you still have $100,000 of house mortgage that is incurring 3% interest per year. That's something that we're going to discuss as well. And last, we're going to talk about some possible income splitting method for your son Henry as he moves on with his career as a lawyer. Now for the primary issue. Please keep decision criteria in mind as we go through the different alternatives. These are the criteria that we use to assess them. First, we want to be able to minimize the tax. We don't want you to pay taxes now if we can defer it in the future. That's something that we think is very important. Second, family ownership. As you mentioned, your son is a prominent lawyer, and we want to make sure that we take that into consideration and keep your legacy going forward. Third one is the heir income for retirement. We want to make sure that you're going to be living comfortably and not having. We want to be able to make sure that you're going to be living comfortably and having the $100,000 to $125,000 as you retire. Here are the different alternatives that we looked at. First one is a third party can purchase Meal Incorporated. The second one is Henry can personally purchase the shares of Meal Incorporated. And the third one is we're going to implement an estate freeze to transfer the ownership of the common shares from your holding company, Susan, to Henry. And now I'm going to pass it along to Troy to discuss the different alternatives in detail.
Thanks, Marielle. So I'd first like to start off with a discussion of what a qualified small business corporation is. A QSBC is
is a corporation that allows an individual who holds shares has that investment that can negate up to $800,000 of capital gains upon the sale of those shares. So in order to be a qualified small business corporation, the business must be a CCPC, or a Canadian-controlled private corporation. Additionally, at the time of sale, 90% of the fair market value of the assets have to be used in active business. And over the past 24 months, 50% of the fair market value of assets have to be used in active business. And over that same course of time, an individual or a related party has to hold those shares. And I'd like to call your attention to the word individual, because currently those shares are held by a holding company. So at this current time, MEL Inc. doesn't qualify as a small business corporation and cannot use its $800,000 capital gains exemption. So with that in mind, I'd like to proceed with a discussion of our alternatives. Our first alternative, as Marielle had said, is the sale of the shares to an external third party. Now, you had mentioned you had a valuation of $1.9 million for these shares, and we've corroborated this valuation using an earnings multiplier of 8. Now, that earnings multiplier values your tangible assets at roughly $1.08 million, $1.048 million, and is reflective of 12.5% rate of return on those assets. Now, additionally, because your business is a law firm, and because you're so reputable and you're so reliant on the intangible assets, the abilities of your staff, your human resources, your client list, we've also attributed about $900,000 of goodwill to this valuation, and that's how we've agreed with the $1.9 million valuation. Are going to proceed with this going forward. So basically, upon sale, there will be capital gains that will be triggered, and this is something that we want to keep in mind, because it's a significant tax imposition that will be incurred by you, Susan. Now, you're going to lose absolute ownership upon the date of sale, and that's something also we want to keep into consideration, because this business is going to transfer upon date of sale, and we need to make sure that you're ready to retire at that time. So the tax payable for the holding corporation is roughly $379,000. However, the tax payable by Richard is completely negated by his own capital gains exemption, because he holds shares separately, assuming that he hasn't used his exemption up to this point. It provides Susan with $1.05 million after tax, and Richard with about $475,000 to live off for retirement going forward. Our second alternative is to sell the shares outright to Henry. Now, it's quite similar to the last alternative. However, it leaves the business in your family's hands, and that's something that we did consider. The same valuation, we're using $1.9 million. And we had discussed the non-interest-bearing note that was going to be given to Henry, and we want to recommend that first you hire Henry as an employee of your business before offering this non-interest-bearing note. Now, the reason for that is the CRA has some prescriptions that they have in place to mitigate cash being flowed to an individual for no necessary reason. Now, in establishing that employment relationship, Henry is going to be taxed upon an employment benefit resulting from the difference from the CRA prescribed rate of 1% and the actual interest that he will pay. So that is going to result in Henry paying about $8,900 in tax upon the issuance of the loan. The same implications for Susan and for Richard are in place. However, as I had said, the law firm does stay in the family, and that's something that we did evaluate our criteria on, so please keep that in mind. Now on to our third alternative, and that's the use of an estate freeze to transfer the ownership to your son going forward. Now, first of all, I'd like to talk about what an estate freeze really is. An estate freeze is a way of transferring the current value of your shareholdings to another, of freezing the current value of your shareholdings by way of the issuance of preferred shares and the issuance of nominal value common shares to participate in the growth of your business going forward. So, in order to do this, we're going to need to amend the Articles of Incorporation for your business, and we're going to need to make sure that the Articles of Incorporation allow for the issuance of voting preferred shares. And now, after doing this, we're also going to recommend the implementation of a discretionary family trust, and this is to add a little bit of value to your son's tax system. A discretionary family trust is a way of transferring the income and capital gains of an investment to a number of beneficiaries, as outlined in the trust, and ensures that the capital gains exemptions of those individuals can be used cumulatively. So we're going to recommend the beneficiaries be implemented of you, Henry, of Susan, of Richard, as well as an additional corporate beneficiary and their children. This is going to result in no tax and at the date of the freeze, so that's a huge advantage because no tax has to be actually paid upon the installation of the 8-day state freeze. Now also to provide Susan with $225,000 of after-tax earnings, we can issue $309,000 of dividends to ensure that she is living comfortably going forward. So I'd just like to show how this recommendation looks with an organizational structure. You can see on the right hand of the screen is Henry's Family Trust, and the beneficiaries of that trust are, as previously mentioned. We're then going to recommend the institution of the estate freeze, freezing Richard's value as well as Susan's holding company's value, and the issuance of new common shares to participate in the growth to Henry's Family Trust. And also on the left of the screen, you'll see a new corporation, a real estate holding company, and that's the holding company that we're going to have, we'd like to implement to hold all of your real estate investments, to separate them from the retained earnings of your business. So what we can do is we'll earn the earnings from Meal Incorporated can be transferred by way of tax-free dividend to Susan's holding company. And in order to remove any potential litigation and liabilities from that holding company, we're going to recommend the transferring of your real estate assets to the real estate holding co. by way of butterfly transaction. Now, it's a complicated transaction that we'd love to discuss at a later date. If at any point you have any questions, please feel free to ask. So keeping in mind the decision criteria that Mary Helen mentioned, minimization of tax, the family ownership structure that we are looking to have going forward, as well as the provision of income for retirement, we will strongly recommend that we implement an estate freeze and transfer the ownership and the growth of the shares of your business to Manny going forward. So just to reiterate that, this is our recommendation because it minimizes tax, retains family ownership, and provides sufficient income. Now on to some secondary issues that we've identified. Our first issue was related to Susan's, to your retirement income. We're first going to recommend that any discretionary income that you have be contributed to a TFSA. Now in 2015, there will be about $36,000 that can be contributed to a TFSA that will be able to accumulate on a tax-free basis and is a good investment vehicle that hasn't been taken advantage of and really should going forward. Additionally, we've looked at your investments in your RRSP, and 90% of those investments are earning about 0.5%. Now this is earning less than the income that you have, or than the cash that you have saved in the savings account. So we would really recommend you getting in touch with your financial advisor to find some new investments to move from that RRSP. Additionally, to provide upon retirement that $125,000 that you're looking for in after-tax income, we're going to recommend the issuance by the holding company to you, Susan, of about $172,500. So with that, I'd like to invite Scott to discuss the rest of our secondary issues and our implementation.
Thank you very much, Troy. Now I'd like to run you through life insurance policy. You had mentioned to us that you have a $1 million term life insurance policy as well as disability insurance. However, you led us to believe that this is not sufficient. So you came to us with other insurance that we go for, the critical health insurance that you brought about. And there's two ways of implementing this. One, your company could buy this, or two, you could. We recommend, first off, that the company buys it as long as you're an employee. That will trigger $6,182 because it's seen as a taxable benefit because you're getting insurance that the company is purchasing for you. After that, we can roll the payments for the premiums to you, and then you can personally hold the plan once you've retired. Going forward, you have a mortgage that you're paying 3% interest on that Mary Ellis mentioned, as well as you have $85,000 in cash in a savings account that's earning only 1%. So anytime that you have cash that is earning interest, or just an investment that's earning interest that is less than the interest that you're paying on debt, you want to pay down that debt. So we're going to take all that cash and pay down that mortgage so you're not paying as much interest. And we're going to do that immediately. Next is income splitting for Henry. So looking from Henry's point of view, unfortunately, so we created this discretionary family trust for Henry. So usually through the discretionary family trust, there's two benefits. One is allocating the capital gains discretionarily, keyword being discretionary. So we can change the allocation of the the assets in the trust to the beneficiaries based on what we want the allocation to be at a future date. So first off, we can allocate the capital gains on the sale of shares amongst the beneficiaries, as well as you can flow dividends through to the beneficiaries. Unfortunately, none of Henry's family is currently a lawyer, so there's special rules for law corporations, and this is one of them, that you cannot flow dividends to Henry's family. However, you still have the capital gain benefit, where you can allocate the capital gains if Henry goes and sells the corporation down the road, which is extremely beneficial in mitigating up to $3.2 million, with each person having $800,000 in lifetime capital gains exemption, that based on the information we've been provided, that nobody has used up in the family. So now I'd like to run you through implementation. What are we going to do, and when are we going to do it? First things first, we have to update the articles of incorporation. This will allow us to implement the corporate reorganization that we talked about. And then Henry will create the discretionary family trust, as well as Henry's holding company. And this holding company is the corporate beneficiary that will allow Meal Inc. to flow dividends tax-free to Henry's holding company. As well, pay down the mortgage instantly. We talked about that. We want to get rid of that interest as much as we can, because you're paying more interest than you're earning on that cash. So first things next, after that, we've implemented the estate freeze, we've implemented the trust and the corporate reorganization that we've talked about. We want to bring Henry's going to move over from Ontario to New Brunswick, and we're going to hire him as an employee. So big things here is at a future date, we can talk about all the tax deductions he can get for moving. He's moving more than 40 kilometers for employment, and there's other deductions he could have personally. So we'll talk about those with Henry at a future date. Another issue for you, Susan, big issue, is that your RRSP, 90% of it was in a money market fund that's only earning about 0.5% interest. That's unfortunately not very high interest, so just a thing to try to maximize your RRSP is to look for other RRSP opportunities to try to earn at least 1% or a few percent would be ideal. And then we're going to create the new real estate holding company that all your rental properties, the 2 rental properties you currently own, will be shifted over, so that way no liabilities associated with the rental properties can attack retain the earnings that are sitting in your holding company. Then kind of long-term implementation. Moving forward after that, hire Jennifer as a bookkeeper. She has, so Henry, maybe you might still be in the corporation, hopefully, and Henry's talked that his wife would like to come and work for the company. So she's a bookkeeper, she has a lot of experience there, so hire her. That will allow level of income splitting. And then as well, for you, Susan, moving forward, we talked about the just over $171,000 in dividends that will require for you to have $125,000 in income that you want, in after-tax income, I apologize, that you seek to maintain the lifestyle that you want. As well, you still have the $175,000 in RSP and the $300,000 in rental properties that you can sell to earn additional income should you seek that or potentially run out of money in your holding company. So with any implementation plan that we talk about, with any business venture, there's always going to be some risks, and how are we going to mitigate them? So the first risk is mismanagement. So if Henry comes in and mismanages the corporation once you've given him operation of the business. So based on the implementation plan we talked about, through the estate freeze, the key word for the type of shares that we're providing each person. So Henry will have the voting common shares, and those are going to be 1,000 voting common shares, but we are going to give you 755,000 voting preferred shares, as well as your husband will have the extra $250,000 voting shares. So essentially, between you and your husband, you will have 1 million voting shares, so you can outvote Henry in any situation. So should he mismanage it, you can come in, take back control or operations of the company, or hire somebody else externally to properly manage the business, as well as any liabilities. So we have implemented a lot of creditor proofing, so to mitigate a lot of the liabilities with the rental companies are separated now, and Henry has a holding company as well as you have a holding company. So that way, all of your cash, the earnings from Meal Inc. can be flown up to the tax-free to those holding companies, and that way the liabilities in Meal Inc. cannot attack the profits that you've flown up to your holding companies. And then, unfortunately, in the case of any sudden passing or injury, we want to create a will. So as far as in case of any sudden passing, the estate freeze passes the gains on to Henry's family, the future gains. So we've minimized that tax, as well as the life insurance that we've talked about you currently have and you will buy. So that's in case of sudden passing or injury again. And then we want, so create a will would be the last step to just allocate on your passing any assets to whether it be Henry, your other child, or either of their families. Now we would like to answer any questions that you might have for us.
Do you have any concerns about Henry's ability to manage the partnership or start a practice should I become ill in the next year or two?
We did look at Henry's reputation. He is your son, and we agree with you that he has such tremendous skill as a lawyer to manage the business. And also the tax structure that we've implemented, allowing you to have 750,000 voting preferred shares to outvote any management decisions that he makes. It is a huge benefit to have to essentially veto any poor decisions that he's making.
You mentioned in terms of retirement, not even retirement, but ongoing money that would come towards me, that you would propose that the company pay $172,000 in dividends per year to me, which sounds wonderful. Had you had an opportunity to look at whether you think the company can sustain that kind of after-tax payment to me?
Right now, the company is very profitable, and we do believe that Henry will be able to maintain and continue the growth of the business in the future. He also mentioned that he's looking into like some government contracts, which will increase the income of the company as well.
You suggested basically taking the $85,000 cash and just paying down the mortgage. Susan might be a little bit concerned that that leaves her a bit cash poor in the short term. Is there a way to mitigate that risk that she might need that cash in the short term? Is there a better utilization of those funds maybe than paying down the mortgage?
Based on you not having any other debt, unfortunately your RRSP is locked up unless you were going to put a new down payment on a house. But so unfortunately your RRSP being your main investment locked up, and then you having rental income. So rental income from the rental properties is one way of paying down the mortgage. So that offers just over $8,000 per year from between the two houses in income that you can pay down. That cash, though, it seems to be is the only other asset that you had given to us through the information that we had. So we believe that you might want to save on a little bit of that, just keep a little bit of cash, but overall that cash would be more beneficial rather than earning 1%. It would be beneficial to pay down the few percent.